Hello and welcome to this new edition of the Foojay Podcast. Today we are traveling to the US where we will visit two Java user groups.
Welcome to the Foojay Podcast, all your news about OpenJDK.
We started the Foojay Podcast JUG World Tour in Manchester last December. Last month we were in Dubai. And now we are on the other side of the world in the US to meet the people behind the Denver and Boulder JUG.
Hi, my name is Greg Ostravich. I started in Java in the late 90s when I was working for what is now CenturyLink. It was US West and then it became Quest. And when I was working for US West, I got my Java certification. I went to a No Fluff, Just Stuff event hosted by Jay Zimmerman in 2001. And I think that's also when I really started going to the Java users group in Denver, which met on DU's campus. I'm not sure if Tom Mars was running the group then. In 2001, I started to work for the Colorado Department of Transportation and used Java for some back-end data manipulation and a Swing GUI app, that's how old this was, for human resources to view data that they needed to work with.
My name is Zettie Chin-Fong. In my day-to-day life, I'm an Android engineer working in Kotlin, but I started a long time ago in development also, and I learned C, C++, and Java in school, but early on in my career, I was doing a lot of DoD work, and we mostly did C and C++ development. I think when I started working for telecom companies is when I started having to learn Java, and that's when I found DJUG. And I was living in Colorado Springs at the time, and so I'd drive up, come to the meetings every so often. But I don't think, I think it was around 2010 when I decided I wanted to volunteer because I was coming a lot. And before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of the announcements. And most recently, I've been taking up the role of dealing with the sponsors.
So my name is Kris Woyna. I've been using Java since the 90s also. I've used it in a variety of settings from embedded to very, very large enterprise systems. I've also used it in science settings, including NOAA, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, the National Center of Atmospheric Research, and most recently at the National Ecological Observatory Network, which is funded by the National Science Foundation.
Yeah, so my name is Matt Raible. I got involved with the Denver JUG way back in the early 2000s. I went to school for not computers. I got a degree in Russian International Business and Finance, and then got into open source in Java in the early 2000s, found the Denver JUG, and started going to meetings, frequently for 10 years, 15 years. And then I think it was 2015 or 16, I decided that I wanted to get more involved and help find speakers and help find venues, and been doing that ever since.
And I'm Frank Delporte, technical writer at Azul, doing some Java development since 10 years, but I'm overwhelmed with the amount of experience we have in this podcast. We have two JUGs in the room. How long do these JUGs exist?
The Boulder JUG started quite some time ago by Jay Zimmerman, who has gone on to host conferences around the world related to Java technologies. No Fluff, Just Stuff, and he's president of Big Sky Technologies. I was a long-time member, and I eventually, like others, stepped up and took over the leadership role about 20 years ago. Boulder is world famous. It's kind of like a Silicon Valley of the Rockies. We have a lot of Nobel Prize winners in town. We have several federal labs. The community continued to develop. I even, in years past, had meetings with people like Eric Schmidt, who was at Sun at the time, and he ended up building the Oracle campus, which was Sun at the time as a result of that. And now we have a very large Google campus here as well. It's a separate and distinct community, but we're very closely related to the Denver community also.
So the Denver Java users group started around 1994. Corey Klossmeyer started it and kind of moved on to other things. And we used to meet at DU's campus when I first started downtown. And then I found the Agile group was meeting at the Quest Auditorium. And so we were able to use that facility. And then we were meeting at an educational institution in Lowry, as well as the Auraria campus and we've met a few other places, and we're kind of trying to figure out where we're going to be right now, because after COVID, things have kind of closed off as far as some of the places we used to use. I've actually been to the Boulder JUG too and helped out by running that on a few meetings for Jay, and they've kind of floated around too, but they found a place that's really good for them. I started running it around 2008-ish. Somebody had stepped away from the group, and so I kind of picked that up around then. So yeah, we've been around since 1994. So
next year you'll have a big jubilee, 30 years of having a jug.
Hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
Well, actually, there are a few. I think the Manchester Jug, they realized during the podcast recording that they existed nearly 10 years. So I think because of COVID, the events stopped and everyone switched to online, or some of the jugs switched to online events. Was that something you have done in Boulder and Denver, switch to virtual jugs?
Yeah, so that actually worked really well, because we were able to pick up speakers from all over the world. It just, the timing is kind of interesting. I mean, we had a speaker from a Scandinavian country that it was like 3 a.m. during our Java users group. Interestingly, our attendance hasn't been as good online. It's more available, but I think maybe people watch it later. Matt records it and we broadcast on YouTube. But I think it's better attended when we can do it in person, if that works better. And I want to go to Matt and Zettie, because I don't want to hog it all. What do you guys think about that?
I agree. Our attendance suffered a lot. For me, part of what drew me into this community originally was just the in-person interaction. There was a lot of networking, and we were a group before Meetup even existed. So I think it was a more natural, organic community. The attendance numbers were awful. It just didn't feel the same.
Well, I think you say they're awful, but like online, they actually weren't that bad, right? We had like 20 or 30 per meetup, and you might think that that's not very good, but I watched an Angular broadcast, and that's like multiple thousands of people in that community, and there's like 10 on the podcast or 10 on the video, right? So I think a lot of the streaming stuff that happens, you don't get a lot of people watching it in real time. You get a lot of people watching after. And I think the biggest benefit of us doing, that kind of thing during the pandemic was we really kind of grew closer with Kris, right? And we did a lot more coordination because he was on the same meetup and we'd broadcast through StreamYard, having all of us on there as hosts. So even though there was a lot of downsides, I think we grew closer together as, Boulder and Java jugs, and now we're cooperating better. But we also get a lot of people now that are like, is this going to be broadcast, right, for our upcoming meetups? And we're like, no, it's too much work. We're just gonna, in person. And if you don't live here, maybe you shouldn't have joined the meetup, right?
Am I correct? I'm not from the US, so that's a faraway country for me. Is it correct that you're 30-minute drive away?
It's probably more like 45 minutes when there's no traffic problems. So what we did traditionally was that we would schedule back to back, so that as in the old days, speakers would travel around the country quite a bit, or even around the world. So we made it worth our while that Boulder would be one night, and the following night would then be the Denver night. And that really worked well for the membership, because many times if people have had issues with their children or whatever, they would selectively pick and go to one, or they would even go to both. So after the pandemic, we collapsed to one night, and we still often do that. And we do whatever we can to accommodate each other's groups to make things go well.
And I want to throw out here, this is where, Kris had mentioned Jay Zimmerman. Jay has some different Java venues for learning. He would bring in speakers for his venue and then even offer tickets to the venue. And so what we would do is, we'd leverage that back to back, as Kris just said, so that a speaker came in for a no fluff thing, and then they would speak at the Boulder JUG on a Tuesday night, and then the Denver JUG on a Wednesday night. And so that did work pretty well.
Seems a very nice collaboration if you can share your speakers like that.
Also, our state, the mountain range runs north-south, and most of the large cities and urbanization is snugged up against the eastern north-south. So the Boulder tends to get the people from the northern part of the state, and the Denver tends to get more from the southern part of the state. So it's more than just the physical separation, it's the cities to the north and the cities to the south.
So you're covering actually a whole area around Denver and Boulder. Yeah, it's really great. How is the format? Do you have mostly one speaker, two speakers? How do you organize the JUG events?
We've kind of done both. For the longest time, we used to have like a basic concepts kind of thing in the beginning, like from, I don't know, the first hour of the Java users group. We would do like, pizza and socialization before we start. We would do a basic concepts thing, and then we would do a more advanced topic. We've really folded that into just really one speaker for the Java users group, for the Denver Java users group. And I think that's just been, easier to fill speakers. We've also done some sort of breakout groups, if you will. We had a study group mid-2000s on design patterns. And so we would meet outside of the users group for that. And there were some other ones as well. I don't remember on the topics. So, Kris?
Yes.
But yours.
What Greg said.
Okay.
you agree on everything. That's very nice. But I'm abusing a bit these podcast recordings because we are restarting the BJUG, the Belgian JUG. One of the ideas we have for the March session is to invite new speakers and see if we can attract people who never spoke at a JUG or at another event and maybe try this for the first time with a short session. I find it pretty difficult to find these people. Is that something that you have done, training new speakers or people who want to do this for the first time?
Here are some of my tips for finding speakers. And Matt is an actual speaker, so he is a wealth of resources. So probably he should answer this question also. But for me, more as a pedestrian JUG person, what I do is I have looked at our past meetups and the well-attended ones, the popular speakers, we'll contact those. We try to schedule out the meetups at least 1 to 2 years in advance, and we'll email and message potential speakers. We'll give them a schedule of 10 to 20 dates that they can pick from in the future to help accommodate their scheduling. We try not to leave it to last minute doing it like that. Another really clever trick that I've discovered is that I poach speakers from other meetups. So I'll go around the world and I'll look at other meetups, and I'm also a member of several of the other large meetups, and I'll contact speakers of talks that I think were really good.
Similarly, Matt's been booking for us for a while, which has been great. I've used Jay as a resource to find people. The other thing is, as Kris has said, other user groups. So we've been, I don't want to say poaching, but I used to attend the Denver open source users group, and we would sometimes pull speakers for topics that were Java related, because there were some non-Java topics as well. In addition to that, there's a Colorado Springs open source users group, and they'll poach speakers from the Denver open source users group and from our group. The other thing is, as I had mentioned before, the basic concepts, doing that sort of shorter talk is a great way to cut your teeth and to have speakers, try speaking for the first time in what can be a little bit of an intimidating environment. But the other thing we've done that I would recommend is we've done lightning talks. Yep. For our recent December get-together, we did them on fun topics not related to technology at all. I did one on how to juggle. Somebody did one on fostering cats. But the lightning talk format is really a time box tight format, and it's a little easier, and you rotate slides. I have a thing I did on cups, which is a print spooling system to convert HTML to PDF, and I did it as a lightning talk. And in that format, I just had I don't know how many, 50 slides, and they just auto-rotated. So it was a 5 or 10 minute talk. And that might, if you did a collection of lightning talks for one of your meetings, what a great way to present some information, but also maybe call some speakers from that list that you might be interested in having do a basic concepts and or be a featured speaker.
I'm glad you mentioned the lightning talks. That's the first thing I thought of. I think that's been great since we've been doing that. And I get a lot of people. The reason why we say, we let them know it can be any topic. That way they can feel comfortable presenting on whatever they want to, and they can, and just have fun with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was a bit the idea we had. So our next jug, we have one speaker, Gerrit Grunwald, who is very experienced. He has a very technical topic, but in front it can be anything. It's just developer life related, but yeah, it can indeed be anything.
That's a great point. We've done a lot of talks that weren't necessarily Java specific, but were maybe Java tangential, but even developer tangential, developer life, how to learn, maybe how to learn some new topics related to the technology, how to organize it, and how to work with a team. We've done talks that weren't necessarily just pure Java, and those have been great as well.
I ended up taking over from Google the Colorado Kubernetes and Cloud Native meetup, which has a large membership also, and I help with the Boulder DevOps meetup. And they all meet at Rule 4 in Boulder, which I'll talk about in a bit. The upshot, what I figured out was that in addition to having meeting our two meetups, was that I also mash up those meetups sometimes if a topic is of interest to those groups, and people can self-select if they want to go or not. Really people are using multiple technologies. It's not just Java. And those three are kind of closely related. So I've found by co-scheduling those three meetups, we'll have a fairly large in-person attendance.
And how many visitors do you attract in average? Because I know that can change
60,
a lot.
60 plus sometimes.
I would say for sure it depends on the topic / speaker. It's pretty healthy numbers. I don't think we ever cared about tracking the attendance until we moved to Meetup. And I've been thinking about this because it took me a while to remember why. And I think what happened was we kept running out of food. And because we existed before Meetup, we had a message board, that we'd send out information about meetings and then because we've existed so long, I think people just got in the habit of, second Wednesday of the month, they knew when to show up. So not everyone was RSVPing. So then, we started trying to track numbers. But I think the largest attendance we have on record was for Venkat. I think, 122 people showed up. So
Venkat was a huge draw. The other one we did, and I was going to talk about it, you asked about the most remarkable session. We had Grady Booch. He drew about 150 people or more in what was the Quest Auditorium. The local phone company had a huge auditorium that we were using for their training and stuff. And when we had Grady, that was packed. But Venkat's an awesome speaker.
Yeah. We used to meet at Computer Associates when they were Raleigh Software in Boulder. And I think there were many employees there that would just come after work. And a couple times we had in excess of 200 people.
Wow.
It was crazy. But then for security reasons, we had to move out.
So it's an interesting question because now we can't even find a place in Denver that'll seat more than 25. Like Kris doesn't have a problem. He's got, a place that'll have 100, but I haven't been able to find a company in Denver that will give us a place for free for, more than 25 people. So it's a struggle.
Still because of the COVID measures?
They want us to hire security guards. Like we used to do Pivotal, right? And then moved to VMware. And VMware basically had a conversation with them a few months ago, and they were like, we got to hire a security guard. It's going to cost you $250 a meetup, right? And we were like, well, we don't get any income, so we can't do that.
That's a totally different situation than for Belgium, indeed. A lot of companies are interested because not really for the hiring process, but I think it's good for a company to have a JUG as an event coming with a speaker that they self-arranged. So it's just the venue that they have to give you. But indeed, if security guards are needed, then the cost can go up a bit, indeed.
Intellectual property and having high-tech people wandering around in a facility.
Liability concerns also, especially if there's alcohol involved.
Some other JUGs actually have membership and charge for their membership. And I think that's how they help pay for stuff. And we talked about that. And I think we kind of decided, you know what, let's just kind of go with our format, which is we're free and basically a service to the public. That does make it challenging, as Matt said, since COVID for finding a venue, but that's been kind of nice.
After COVID, restarting is a problem?
We had our first in-person meetup, at least in Denver, in January. And it went well, but like I said, 25 is the max. And the cool thing was we packed it, right? Like it was full. And on Meetup, it said 50 people. So we always half that. And it worked out. And I think, I'm speaking next week and we aren't quite to 50 yet, but we're going to try and keep the same venue just because we haven't found another one that'll give us space, right? And so, we've talked about capping the number because, you don't want 50 people in a 25-person room, right? But we're having no problems getting people to show up. We're having problems getting a venue to house other people.
Another thing that kind of changed with COVID, in addition to the venue, as Matt mentioned, is our sponsorships. We had a lot of sponsors who would pay for food, tchotchkes, giveaways, door prizes. Amazon was a sponsor for a little bit, and they'd give away like their the little pucks, the Alexa pucks, and some different things. Matt's company, Okta, he gave away some books of his and some other stuff from Okta. But a lot of the sponsors that would like buy gift cards that we would give away kind of went away. And I think, trying to draw them back in is a little bit of a challenge.
We're really fortunate. We're at Rule 4 in Boulder, Colorado. Rule 4 coming from Isaac Asimov. It's kind of a very playful, emerging technology and cybersecurity company. They have a lot of very kind of exotic toys, a lot of electric bikes, things like that. They're outside magazines, best places to work. They lavishly cater our meetups with hot plates, and it's usually Indian or Mexican or some such thing. So we've been very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, indeed, the venues and how they welcome you and what they offer as an extra drinks and food is really great indeed. You already mentioned a few of the most remarkable sessions. Matt, do you also have one that keeps popping up in your head?
I remember the Grady Booch one pretty well, and it was I also remember the funny story I tell about it. It wasn't Grady himself. It was a guy that I hadn't met yet who became a good friend of mine, and that's Bruce Snyder. I remember seeing him from across the room, and my younger self being kind of naive, I was like, man, that lady keeps asking a lot of really interesting questions, right? And it was because he had long hair, right? And so I remember that one well. And then Bruce and I became good friends because of the meetups, because we'd always go and then we'd socialize after. So that kind of made me think when I start getting involved that we shouldn't do the basic concepts, because what was happening with the basic concepts is it was a regular talk. And so you'd end up sitting through 2 long talks and you'd miss out on the socializing at the end because everyone was like, it's 9 o'clock, I'm done. Right. And so that's why we voted with our community to see if they wanted to do one talk. And that's why we kind of went there. But yeah, Grady Booch is probably my most memorable one. And there's lots of ones with Venkat that we've had, before the pandemic that were like, holy cow, this room is full.
I want to throw out, in addition to Venkat and Grady, was Kathy Sierra. Now, she's stepped away from a lot of stuff because of threats, which was really sad. But she gave a talk on enterprise Java beans, and she did all those headfirst talks, headfirst books for O'Reilly. And so we actually acted out an EJB, putting it in the container and persisting to the database. And that was so much fun. And I just remember, her thing, her shtick was, making it fun so that you would learn, and really enjoyed that talk as well. I wanted to throw that out. It was a long time ago, obviously, since it was Enterprise Java Beans.
Yeah, but you have a long history of JUGs, so.
I did want to mention, along the lines of the worst talk that we've had, I won't say who it was, but we've had some architecture talks. And so I would ask that you might want to avoid that. You get it. It's kind of, you get a company and they're like, oh, we'll provide stuff. But they're basically going to sell a product. And for us, our audience does not like that. But we had one speaker that didn't know the technology they were talking about. And the audience kind of called him on it. I mean, he would say stuff and they were like, no, that's not right at all. So the one thing I would also tell your speakers, don't BS your audience. If you don't know the answer, it's completely okay to say, you know what, I don't know. Let me find out and get back to the jug and have a post that answer.
I really like the small amount of people in the room of a jug that really go into interaction with the speaker. The last jug we had, there were some issues and it was an early release and some errors popped up during the presentation. But then you have the whole audience cooperating with the speaker to fix his issues. So that was really great, and that's really fun if that happens.
And you bring up another great point, Frank, is that a lot of times at not just Java Users Group, but any kind of meetings I go to, I learn from the audience. They're often experts in the technology as well, where there are experts populated throughout the audience. And that interaction, not only for troubleshooting when the demo invariably goes wrong, but also they might be using the technology in a way the speaker isn't using it. And there's been some really great interaction on that as well.
You know, we try to counsel speakers that are less experienced to be succinct and try to stick within an hour to an hour and a half and not to get carried away with excessive coding. Keep it simple. It's a learning experience. And the ones that get brutal and where everything blows up and they can't make things work, we've all seen that.
I would add to that another great tool, and Kris, that was awesome, is practice. There's a guy, Matt McCulloch, he went to work for GitHub, who is from here, and he and Tim Berglund and a few others were local speakers. Matt did a book on presentations with, I think, Neil Ford. And one of the things that they talked about in the book, I did the tech edit for that, was practice in real time. In other words, don't just go over your notes for your talk. Do an hour-long session of your talk in real time before you do the real thing for an audience, because nobody does that, or most people don't, and it's really key. And then record it using a webcam or whatever, or just a camera in your room, and look at that, see how you're doing, see if you have a lot of ums and ahs, and you can really kind of fine tune your presentation before you go prime time.
Matt's an international speaker. You might want to ask him.
Yeah, Matt, do you have tips for new speakers who is going to speak at the first jug?
Well, it's funny because I'm the one who screens the speakers, right? And we have a CFP that's, been open. We usually open a new one every year. And a lot of times I will make people basically, or not make them, but ask them, are they showing code in their presentation or will they be doing any sort of demo, right? And if they say no, then I'm like, I don't think we're interested, right? And so, I tell them we prefer live coding and stuff like that. And it's funny because I'm not going to name names, but there's one person that I've been negotiating with for a talk, and I think it's going to be a great talk, but they're doing it on behalf of someone else. And so what they did is they actually created a video and sent it to me about how they want to, present the talk and the material. And that to me is like something a salesperson would do. And I'm more turned off than I was before, right? If he had just said, yes, we'll take April and here's the abstract, I would have been done, right? But instead he's like, no, it's going to be a really good talk. Let me show you how. And it's not from the person who's doing the talk, right? I think it'd be different if it was from the person doing the talk. But, for new speakers, I think a lot of times it's what Greg said, it's practice. And I've learned this more during the pandemic than I ever have before because of doing screencasts and editing my own screencasts. So I think, maybe like Greg said, turn on the webcam and try to turn that talk into an actual screencast. Because what you'll find is if you haven't practiced, you'll do so much editing that it's really painful, right? Like, you record for an hour, you edit for 8 hours, and you're like, God, this sucks. Versus recording where you did a bunch of practicing beforehand, the editing only takes a couple hours, right? Because you never made any mistakes. So, practice is key, but it's really hard to do, right? No one likes to do it. And that's why, speaking at jugs can be helpful, because in these times when we're not recording, it's very, I think, free, and you can make mistakes and everyone's supporting you, right? Versus like a conference, not so, free of an environment.
I'm a newbie speaker because I finished the book just before COVID. I'm the king of bad timing. So I was going to do jugs and conferences, but I only did virtual ones. I'm afraid to do live coding. I have to be honest. People like Venkat, they are masters, but yeah, they practice and they do it every day. Huh?
I've hung out with Josh and Venkat, and they practice relentlessly. They practice like hours before their talk, right? Like they don't look like, they're practicing, but they are. They practice a whole bunch.
The other thing too, Frank, is the more you do it, the better you get. Just running the jug, I have some people that attended from when I started attending, who have said, you do better. And I think that's just because over time, your skills get better.
I was shocked once. I ended up watching a Peter Gabriel concert from behind the stage. And what I was shocked was that their teleprompters, that all the witty banter and everything was all pre-scripted, that they were just reading off the teleprompters.
Yeah, I think with all these big concerts, I think if you go to the same concert a few days, you just hear the same jokes and stories. And just like you say, it's all been practiced and repeated. As you said, you had some these lightning talks. Do you really train people to get to become a speaker?
No, we haven't done anything to help them become speakers. And in reality, in the last one, we were struggling with the venue, and we're struggling with sponsorship and stuff like that. And so we didn't even announce the lightning talks till like a week before. Mm-hmm. And then and it was like Greg and I and 2 other people or something like that. It wasn't that many.
The foster cat talk wasn't planned. I just asked somebody to do it. We were talking about stuff, and she said, okay. She put it together before her talk at the meeting. So that was pretty impromptu. And it was great. It was a good talk.
Do you have specific plans for the future? Yeah, first finding a venue again and restarting fully after the COVID, but just getting back to schedule, I think that's the main plan.
Well, we've been on schedule, right? It's just been virtual. And so we started our first in-person one in January, and we haven't had a problem getting speakers. I think, the biggest problem is the venue. And then once you have the venue, you can do all kinds of things. And one of the things that we've never been able to do is we always meet on the second Wednesday of every month. And we always get these international speakers that are traveling through the U.S. and want to do a jug tour, right? But we only meet on the second Wednesday of every month, so we never are able to do anything to accommodate them. So I would love to find a venue that would be like, yeah, you can do Tuesday night, or you can do next Thursday, or they're always open for us to, do a meetup. So of course we would need, the actual people, right, to show up. But we do feel like with, 3,600 members or something, that if the topic is appealing, they would, right? But it's, you got to advertise it a month ahead of time to get people to show up, and it can be tough to do if you're like, next week we're doing a meetup,
Matt is actually the guilty party here. So our venue allows us to meet pretty much whenever. And we invited him for next Monday night, and he's like, no way, that's football night. So we pushed it back a night. So we're hosting Matt next week to talk about OAuth. We're looking forward to that.
The other thing too that Matt had mentioned before to us that I want to bring up, because I thought it was great, is I feel like we have a set of attendees that is maybe older and not any of the new graduates from school. And we did get some people from some of those private institutions, like code schools. But Matt has talked about us drawing in younger people to attend, but also to help run it. And I think that's great. And I do think that's the future of the JUG. And I want to definitely try to accomplish that as well.
And how is the mix of your visitors? Young, old, male, female? You have a view on that?
Definitely, mostly male. But, the great thing we have going for us, for as long as I've been helping out, there's always at least one woman developer in attendance. So that works well in our favor. Yeah, definitely mostly male. I think what I was seeing pre-COVID, a lot of mid-career people were looking to learn. I think early on, a long time ago, like the mid to late 2010s or around there, it was a lot of older older male developers, but it's definitely been coming down a little bit. I think the challenge for us, even myself, there's so much you can learn technically, especially on YouTube, right? So I think it's great. We're going to try to attract younger people. I'm just not sure how yet.
When I first started to go into Denver JUG, it was because I needed a job, right? And so I think, we're kind of back in that era where maybe we weren't there 6 months ago, but now we could see people coming just to network and try to get their next gig. So hopefully that brings the younger folks in.
We get some folks like that. But what I want to also add is that if you pay attention, sometimes there are people with basically no IT or computer science experience. And you kind of have to, you don't have to, but as a nice person, you want to be able to mentor them and let them know what they're in for and how realistically they can get from A to B. And that's also a lot of, I think, the meetup experience is mentoring people with career issues or technology issues or coworker issues, those types of things also.
The other thing too is with not meeting online, but meeting in person, I really enjoy just meeting up with my friends that I haven't seen in a month at the Java users group. I have a lot of people that I've met through the group, and that's been really great. Some of them have kind of moved on, but you talked about, just jumping back to the speakers real quick, Matt McCulloch really cut his teeth at the Denver Java users group, the open source users group, and the no fluff stuff before becoming kind of an internationally known speaker, as well as Tim Berglund. Matt, I don't know if you started with us when you were writing some of your first books, but what a great way to kind of interact and meet with people that are actually using the technology, not people just kind of talking about it.
I think for some people, the talk is not that important, but what happens after the talk and the drink before.
That's a great point. Frank, we do, for our Java users group, we would have a meal before the talk, just kind of pizza or whatever, that we'd have the basic concepts when we first started. We're not doing that anymore. We do our featured talk, but afterwards we go to a bar and hang out. And Matt's company has been very generous about sponsoring food and drink at that, and we just hang out and talk about stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean technology, and it's just been really great. That's been a lot of fun. So I would recommend, if you can, do a social thing after the meeting's finished. That's been really good.
Literally all of my ski, rock, and ice climbing partners are through the JUGs. That's been great.
A very nice side effect. So another question from my personal point of view for the Belgian JUG. Our idea is to have locations in different locations, and then see if we can attract a community in a city and maybe split up again in different JUGs. Do you have some tips to organize JUGs at different locations and attract new people, new speakers, new visitors?
I was just going to say, I think that's a great idea. If you can find venues in different cities.
I've done some JUG tours in the last several years. I even did it last year in Ireland and the UK. And the funniest thing I discovered is the best organizer was a recruiter. And so it was the guy who runs Barry runs the Dublin JUG. If I contact him and tell him I want to do a JUG tour in Cork and Dublin and Belfast and, in the UK, he arranges it all. And he's very motivated because he's a recruiter, right, to get people there. So I think, it's one of the things traditionally with our JUG, they've been like online, they're kind of a pain, right? They join the mailing list and spam the mailing list, and you're like, right? But for people looking for jobs, especially if they're at the meetup, they can be very helpful. So I've even thought if we got new leadership or younger leadership, like it might be good to partner with a good recruiter as well to kind of, have that motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely see if you can team up with recruiters. We've had some different recruiting companies sponsor us from the beginning. And that's been a big source of, help with the sponsorship, but also like they'd provide, provide food and some other things, and sometimes a venue. So that's going to be really helpful to you. And then, as Matt said, you can get people that are looking for work. That's been a draw for us as well. And I think that's really been a great symbiotic relationship.
Matt, if you schedule a world tour, you forgot Belgium, I think.
Yep, I've been meaning to do Belgium and Germany. So they're on my wish list.
Belgium is very small, so I can understand that you forgot it or just overlooked it.
I love Belgium. The beer is so delicious.
That's maybe the main argument to attract new speakers, our Belgian beer. Kris, what is for you the most important thing of a JUG, of a community event?
I think it's just bringing together a common community of experience that we're all going through variations of the same thing. The value of sharing those experiences and how things could be better with technology or work processes.
Zettie, so something you can add?
I think making people feel welcome. I know for me, back when I first started attending, it was very intimidating, and I joined just in time for the design pattern sessions, and that was supremely helpful. So I think a lot of people, they show up for the first time, they're a little intimidated. They randomly hear about the group and they're not sure. So if I see a new face, I try to go talk to them, ask them why they were there, and try to guide them on how they can get what they need out of the group. So yeah, just making people feel welcome.
Thank you. Greg, what is most important for you for a JUG?
I like what's already been said, and so I'm not going to repeat it, but those are really important things. The other thing is basically to pepper information to people that might not otherwise have access to it. So maybe in your work environment, you really do server-side stuff, and you've never done other things that you would get exposed to in the Java users group. At my own work, we are starting to do, we have been for a little while, more DevOps type stuff. And that's been around for a long time, but I was first exposed to it at the JUG. Same with the design patterns users group that we did. I really didn't learn about them from the Gang of Four, but there's another book and we had a speaker, and then that users group, that little breakout group was a great way to learn the technology and then share that at your workplace as well. So it's been a great way to learn things I wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to.
Yeah, we already have a lot. Matt, something you can add?
I will add that community. I think I've really enjoyed the open source community in my life, as well as like the Java community and the Denver JUG community, and even other communities like, the Denver Nuggets is an NBA basketball team, and it's fun to root for them, right? The Denver Broncos, not so much. They're not as good in the NFL, but being a part of those groups is very rewarding when it's going well, right? And for the sports teams, it's a little different because they struggle, and then it's tough to be a part of those groups. But with Java, like, it seems like we're all rooting for the same thing, right? And we're all rooting for each other and just trying to get better and do our careers and make a living. And it's fun to do it with other people and see their successes.
Okay, I will add to the show notes of this podcast some links. So I have the meetup link for the Denver Java users group. I also have the meetup for Boulder Java user groups. Are there a few other links I should add?
There's djug.org. Do you have that on your list?
Not yet.
We also have the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/DenverJug.
That's right.
It might not be as active, right, going forward, because we're just trying to get people in person and get a venue. But if we start getting 100 people a meetup again, and I feel the desire to start recording them again, that could certainly get active again.
Yeah, the recording is definitely something which make the event harder to organize.
Right.
Good. Thank you, first of all, guests of this episode, and you for listening. Keep an eye on Foojay for future articles about development and everything related to the Java world. And let us see where our JUG World Tour will bring us next month.
Give me a Foo, give me a J, give me the friends of OpenJDK.